Recording. Okie doke. So welcome back, everybody. Here we are for our next little hour and a half of Fear Partner Up Workshop. Yay! And so this is kind of where we finished off last time. And before we get started, I had a couple of people share with me the homework. So, I asked, what were your takeaways and how could you apply and, the difference that it made. And so one of the responses I got was all about how all my life I thought that all of these doubts that I was having were my self-doubts. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that is such an amazing journey to actually be able to realize that here we are. And hey, now that I recognize their doubts, that means I was just lacking information. So now I can go in search of information and I can quit doing all the damage to my self-worth by thinking it's me. And so I just wanted to share that because that's a really powerful place to be in, where you start to realize that it's not all you. And then how to change it is a really simple avenue. And so extremely good place to go. And I wanted to share that. And now I see my very special guest has shown up. So I'll introduce her and then I'll let her kind of take over. Hi, Alan. All right. So I asked my friend Sukie to join us, and I think she's an absolutely wonderful, amazing lady. And we're both kind of on the same path where we really want to empower people and give them the tools necessary so they have the best life possible. And she has so adequately put into words and videos and strategies some of the stuff that I was innately doing in my healing journey to get more connected to my body in the process that I went through trying to remove the trauma, the PTSD and all of that. And so anyhow, I was lucky enough that she agreed to come and introduce herself to all of you and share her wisdom and all of that. So I'm going to leave her to do the rest of her introductions and everything. So Sukie, take it away.
Hi, let me start my video here. Hello.
Hi. Should I try to make it? Did you want to screen share? Or you
Oh,
just
gosh.
want to talk?
I think we'll just talk today.
Okay,
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to a fantastic conversation. So thank you for the lovely introduction. And yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sukie Baxter. I'm an embodiment coach, and I work with the nervous system. So a lot of people find me through some videos that I have on YouTube, dealing with polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, and specifically, although that's not all I do. I work with primarily healers at the moment. I teach healers how to heal their own nervous systems and then how to share that with their clients. But a lot of what I do is based on the work that I have done with my own horses. I've had horses my whole life. And horses are such an amazing example of the stress system and the stress responses that we have inside of our own human mammalian bodies. So I take a lot of inspiration from the wild world.
Yes, me too. And it's a great learning place.
Yeah. Like you said, we're on a very similar path.
Yeah. And so now, if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to ask away. And in the meantime, Suki will just share some more little things that she does and how she got here and her big project that she's got going. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so feel free to ask away.
Yeah. And I'm happy to share with you all about the work that I'm doing, but I love to have questions. Questions are sometimes the best way to make this work extremely rich and deep. And so, if you have questions along the way, please ask them. It looks like we've got a pretty small group here, so I'm sure that I hope that's okay, Mona, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be fine if you want to unmute or ask a question, or if you want me to expand on anything. And Mona, you too, like I would
Yeah.
love to have a conversation with you. And if there's something you'd like to go more in depth about, please definitely let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am, because I think that it's sometimes really helpful to kind of know how I got to where I'm at with what I do and why. So I very early on in my life, I was in college actually, and I was rowing on the intercollegiate crew team. uh, Basically, I plead temporary insanity for that. We had to get up really early in the morning, 6 days a week, and get out in this freezing cold lake and carry the bus down to the lake on our shoulders and down this big hill and put them in the water and row. And I had never done anything that athletic in my life. I was a lifelong equestrian. I can't remember a time when I did not want to ride horses. I literally have a vague memory of being like maybe 2 years old and understanding that like horseback riding is a thing, and was like, I must do that. I just have always been like, that is the thing for me. So I had ridden horses since I was about 7 or 8 years old, and shown competitively. And when I went to college, my parents said, we want you to focus on school. So we don't want you to ride, or have horses while you're in school, which is like, I literally, like, what do people do on their weekends if they don't have horses? I still don't know. I literally don't know what to do with the weekend. So I didn't know how to meet people. I didn't know how to have a social life outside of horses. I didn't know any of this. So I joined the crew team because I'm very tall and and there were no cuts, right? So like I wasn't going to be making any basketball or baseball teams or anything like that. I wasn't good at it. So I'm like, well, crew, I've never rode crew, but no one else has either. And I'm tall, and they say that's a good thing. So here I am on this crew team. And very quickly, I started to develop a lot of body pain, unsurprisingly. And so after about a year of rowing on this crew team, I had tendonitis and knee pain and like all kinds of issues in my physical being. And I ended up getting some body work from a gentleman who actually had come to the barn where my mom had our horses at the time and was doing stuff for the horses. And of course, all of us humans were like, we need it too. And he did human work. So I went to him, and yes, my pain diminished, but I had this completely unexpected other side effect. And that is that my anxiety diminished. I didn't even know I had anxiety because I'd always lived with it. It just was always there. It was who I was. I was just kind of emotional. But I walked away from this bodywork session and was like, I feel good. like in a way, like emotionally, in a way I never had before. And I was hooked. I was like, what is this magic? I must learn it. This is incredible, because it had such a powerful effect on me. And so right out of college, I was probably going to like go into business. I don't even know. I have a degree in linguistics. I don't know what I was going to do. But I was going to get a job like you do out of college, and then do whatever you do. And I took a hard left turn. It was like, I'm going to go study body work. And so I started a body work practice because I wanted to understand what was going on with this body work. It was amazing. And I very quickly observed a couple of patterns. So one is that when you learn body work, you were generally told, I don't know what they're teaching right now, the research has changed, but when I was going to school, they teach that when you apply pressure to someone or a horse, because I also did equine body work, or a dog or a cat, anything, what you're doing is you're, quote, breaking up adhesions in the tissue, or you're like separating sheets of fascia or stretching fascia, or somehow applying a mechanical force to the body that then, changes the tissue structure. Well, that did not map with what I saw in my practice when I started working with people. I had people come in who, I swear to you, they would come in the room and they would just get better just being in the room with me. Like, it was almost like they walked in the door and they're like, I feel better. And almost like that. And I had other people where there was not a thing I could possibly do. They would not change. Their posture never changed. Their movement never changed. How they felt never changed. Like, I swear I could use a jackhammer on them. Nothing would change.
Those are the hanger-oners.
Yeah. Well, and so, but I was the same practitioner, right?
Yep.
So I'm applying the same pressure to these people, and there was no consistency in muscle density or body, like it wasn't like, oh, like really dense muscle people just require more pressure, which is a thing you're also told. It wasn't like that. I had people who were densely muscled and it's like, a little pressure and they'd be like, oh, my shoulder pain's gone. I'm like, really? Wow. Okay. And then I had these people who weren't that at all, little wiry things. And it was like, no amount of pressure was helpful. So I'm like, there's like no correlation here at all. And so why this is so important is that this is what led me to be like, I think it's something in the nervous system. And I was saying that, so when I started my bodywork practice, by the way, I was 24. So I was this really young kid. And no one was talking about this stuff. This is like pre-Facebook, y'all. Like it's like ancient history. So
Yeah.
we had Google, but like we didn't have Facebook, and we didn't even have the internet in my office. That's, we like had a book with a pencil, which was archaic even then, but still, for doing our scheduling, right? So no one was talking about this. There was no information on the nervous system. There was no place where you could go to like really learn about this stuff. Research was really hard to come by, but something pinged for me, and then I'm like, there's got to be something going on in the way that the person is sensing. Because the people who are changing the most are the ones that have a really strong mind-body connection. They're the dancers, the martial artists, the equestrians, right? Equestrians have a lot of mind-body connection. It requires a lot to be an equestrian. And weightlifters actually have to really think about their position, right? So, and there's other, general activities as well. But I really was able to trace like, okay, the people who are coming to me who are really in tune with their body, they change quickly. They have a high probability of having a result. So it's got to be something in the sensory system, and that's connected to the nervous system. And so that was like the, Pandora's box. So I've been saying this for a really long time. And the research that we have now that has come out really it really bears this out, right? So we now know that in order to create mechanical changes in a person or an organism's fascia, you would have to apply, I think it's like 1,000 pounds per square inch or something. It's massive. It's like you would need an elephant to stand on you and then you would be dead. So not helpful, right?
Yes.
At all. So we're not breaking up adhesions. We're not mechanically stretching fascia. And the other thing that I really saw was like, people would ask me like, what's the best stretch for my hamstrings? And I would think about this and I'm like, well, why are hamstrings even tight? Well, it's not because the muscle's actually too short, right? Like there's nothing wrong with the length of the muscle. When you bend forward and touch your toes, that stretching, like painful stretching feeling that you get in the back of your hamstrings is actually something called the stretch reflex. It's your body's own protective mechanism that is then contracting the muscle to protect you from going too far and tearing it. So the body senses instability, right? Nervous system senses instability, and sends a signal to your brain sends a signal to your muscle, your central nervous system sends a signal to your muscle to contract to save you from doing yourself bodily harm. Well, so
Yes.
then I'm thinking like, okay, it's not these people's hamstrings that are too short. It's their nervous system that's getting the wrong kind of signaling, right? Like everything led me back to the nervous system.
And so on that note,
Yeah.
So in that part of the journey for me, I discovered that if I contracted the opposite muscle group, I elongated the muscle group that was tight. So as an example of my hamstring was tight, if I flexed or contracted my quadricep, then the hamstring loosened.
Yeah.
And so it became a world of opposites, and the exact opposite of everything that I'd ever been taught. And so then I couldn't find anywhere that I looked to validate what I was finding
Mhm.
until I found you. And so then you started to validate what I was like, okay, this isn't what I've been taught. This isn't how this works. And so you're supposed to stretch this stuff out. And you know, the longer the stretch, the better. And then I discovered, well, just by releasing the opposite muscle group. So if I had low back pain, I'd contract my lower abdomen and the back pain would just disappear. And
Mhm.
I am like, okay. And then when you can't find anywhere to validate what you know is going on, then it's really hard to, you kind of know something, but as soon as you try explaining it to somebody, they're just looking at you like you're three sheets to the wind, and you have nothing to hook it to. You have nothing other than, well, I don't know, but it works.
Yeah.
And so I had to throw that in there because that's a really hard place. So I can imagine what it was like for you in that journey, because you'd have been the same as me because you were way ahead of me. And then trying to find somewhere where you could say, well, yeah, I'm not the first building block here. Somebody else has something that they can add to this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're not alone in that. So the type of body work that I used to practice, I don't do it anymore, but when I did practice, it's called Rolfing. And it's the work of Ida Rolf. And she has a very, when you go and study this, there's a very well-known quote from Ida Rolf: when flexors flex, extensors extend, which is exactly what you're talking about, Mona. It's like the opposite muscle groups, that the antagonistic muscles will elongate the agonist, right? So like if you, whatever the opposite muscle is, if you contract it, the other one has to extend. And this is what actually looks like grace to us. So when that's happening in balance in a body, that's what we look at, whether it's a human who's moving, in a graceful way, or a horse that has like good collection or good movement. It's because there's this balance in these muscle groups where, when the one that's contracting contracts, the other one is extending. When you don't get that, it looks very awkward and kind of jarring and janky, and that's not very graceful movement. And it
Exactly.
also
There's
results in pain.
no fluidity.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
when I was not like not free flowing, not fluid, it would mean I would slip. And no matter what, it's an abrupt action, and you always hurt yourself. You always throw something out or you do whatever. But the more balanced you get and the more fluid you get, then that slip is just part of a whole nother movement and you carry on. There is no abrupt end that jars everything all out of whatever. And life just is a bunch of flow and ebb and movement. Is totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there is exercise science that like supports this, but you're right, it isn't popularly known, right? So you'll come across people who are aware of this, and increasingly so, but it's not something that, you get in your generic yoga class, right? And you're right, like you said, the longer the stretch, the better. But really, all that you're doing when you're stretching for a long period of time, it's not that that's bad. It's not a terrible thing to do. It can be very relaxing. However, there's no active engagement of your nervous system. You are passively waiting out your body's contraction of the muscle, right? So remember, if it's the stretch reflex, which is your body contracting the hamstring or whatever muscle you're stretching, I don't know why I always use hamstrings. They just seem like an obvious example, but but whatever muscle that it's contracting, you bend forward and you grab your toes and you wait until that contraction goes away. You're basically waiting for your body to fatigue and for that muscle to extend, which is, it can release the stretch reflex contraction, but it doesn't teach your nervous system how to have coordination of that muscle.
Absolutely. And when I was at my worst with my PTSD and all of that stuff, basically waiting for something to relax was almost like overloading everything even worse. Like I wasn't doing my nervous system any favors trying to push it where it just was not ready to go, because everything I was doing was engaging it even more and not in a healthy way to teach it how to just go back to rest. And so over a period of time, everything in my life got worse, way worse,
Mhm.
because the harder I tried, unknowingly, the more I was creating more constriction, restriction, and more reluctance for my body to go into the relaxed way that it should have been. And then after a while, you forget what that relaxed feeling feels like. And then you start to think how you are feeling is normal.
Yeah, exactly. Just like me, right? So, I mean, I grew up with anxiety. Um, Lots of reasons for that, but but I didn't know I had it because I didn't know what it was like to not have it. I had no idea. And a lot of us live like this all the time. So the connection here, because we're talking a lot about like pain science and like exercise physiology. And so what does all this have to do with PTSD and trauma and fear and anxiety and all of these like more what we would consider cognitive or mental emotional conditions? Um, is again the nervous system, right? So, like I said, it's Pandora's box. So, the patterns that create pain in the body, the nervous system patterns, the pathways that are connected to pain, are connected to a sense of lack of safety and threat, right? Threat to survival. So those are the same pathways that are connected to fear, trauma, and anxiety, and all the other things. And actually, when you really start like unraveling this thread, you find that this is all connected to autoimmune conditions, heart disease, inflammation, like all kinds of other health conditions as well. I think diabetes, it's at the root of so many mental, emotional, and physical conditions. Like it's unbelievable. But basically, when your nervous system is not what we call regulated, meaning it is sort of stuck in a state of stress, stuck in a state of trauma, if you will, although that's a loaded word. We can talk more about that. But when it's stuck there, we do not experience life well. We are uncomfortable physically, we are uncomfortable mentally, we're uncomfortable emotionally, and we have a really hard time connecting to other organisms, people, or other critters, right? And what tends to happen is that the whole world looks like a very frightening, scary, dangerous place. So what that means is that on a macro level, like we might have circumstances where like we just have anxiety going out in social situations. We don't like going to the grocery store. We don't like going to parties. For me, I had anxiety around what I would term large groups of people who all know what they're doing, like coming into a group of people that was established, where like there was an etiquette and like people kind of knew what was going on. I hated that. It caused me horrible anxiety. I'm much better at it now. um, but on a more micro level, like this can actually be your body's own movement, right? So this is where people get like chronic pain, or that you get pain at the site of an injury that is long since healed. The reason is that your nervous system has become sensitized to your body's own movement. So you move, your muscles and your fascia and your tissue stretches, and you have little cells in your tissue that say, hey, brain, we're stretching, or we're shearing, or we're, vibrate, whatever movement we're doing. There's different cells, different types of receptor cells in there that tell you about this movement. And it's like, hey, stretching is happening. That's all they're saying. Stretching is happening. But your brain goes, oh no, stretching is happening. It's not safe for you to stretch there. We better push the big pain button. Right. And so that's where we get these chronic pain conditions. A lot of times it's diagnosed as things like non-specific back pain, where you go into the doctor and they put you in all these imaging machines and they're like, we can't find anything wrong. We think it's all in your head. It's not all in your head. It's in your nervous system.
Yeah, that's so important because in the beginning, when I didn't know anything about the nervous system, and I was trying to unravel stuff, what I did have is extremely well adapted mind-body awareness. And so I would find these restrictions. I just could not often totally release them because I didn't understand enough, but nonetheless, I could find them, I could feel them. And if I went to a practitioner and they'd say, can you engage this muscle? I could engage whatever muscle they said, even stuff that was really internal. And they were always really, really surprised. But I was very well connected. But even with that, I could not undo some of the stuff until I started to understand how important breath is, how important breathing through your belly is, how important, like all of these things that are so tiny, so small that we don't even think about, and yet how beneficial they are for us to be able to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have a lot of anchors for this in our culture because we operate so and this was my frustrations. You talked about like being frustrated, Mona. Like when I was doing body work and I was working one-on-one with clients, my frustration was not with the people themselves because it wasn't their fault, but with the fact that these people were coming from a culture that like they didn't know this culture was training them, and it's all of us in a certain way. Right. So we all grow up with certain fundamental beliefs that are just sort of taken for granted, that like they're never taught to us. They're just assumptions that we make. And one of the assumptions in our Western culture is that the mind and body are separate. And we may talk about the mind body connection, but we tend to talk about it as like a telephone line. Like I always think of it like tin cans, like tin cans and a string, that like the brain, and it's always brain over body, right? Brain will talk to body, but we don't talk a lot about how to be connected to our physical selves. And in fact, in a lot of ways, we are actively conditioned away from connecting to our physical selves. If you think about most people's typical school experience, when you're very young, school it includes a lot of movement, a lot of play, a lot of recess, a lot of times for you to be up and not seated, and like to be tactile and kinesthetic. And increasingly, as you get older, that goes away. They take away recess, they take away, like things like Play-Doh and art. Those are the things that get cut, right? The things that are tactile, that are sensory, that stimulate you. And increasingly, we have to sit at our desks. And what is considered being a good child is to sit quietly without moving and not making noise. Even to the extent that, you can't eat when you're hungry. You have to wait until there is a designated break for snack or for lunch or for whatever. You have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You can't even just follow your own biological urges. And these are just sort of like the really basic things. But if you look at a lot of, other beliefs that are infused into our culture on many levels, we will sort of be taught that we can't trust our physical urges, that they will lead us like, quote, astray, right? Depending upon what kind of spiritual community you grew up in. A lot of times we just sort of like think about like, gluttony as a sin, right? Like you can't trust your appetite. Or even diet culture, right? We have to control what we eat. We have to measure it. We have to weigh it. We have to look at the calories. We have to, eliminate, excess. We can't trust ourselves to be led by our own internal urges in so many ways. It's just, when you start looking at this, it's everywhere in so
Yes.
many places.
And it's one of the big things, in my opinion, as to why we have so much stress on our bodies. Is because the environment in which we live in is loaded with all of this stuff that consciously we may not be aware of, but our subconscious mind is busy working away. And so it has us trying to mold and fit in and belong. And then we forget all about all of our own needs. They just get kind of swept away because the focus is going with the herd and fitting in because that's the safe place. And then over time, you don't even recognize everything that's happening. And it's the people that I usually see, they usually start having some really serious health conditions before they start even wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
because they never recognized the whole journey up there. And I can talk about that because I was one of them. I was so busy white knuckling my way, stiff lipping it or doing whatever to get through to go to the next place that I had to experience every single one of these horrible traumas to knock it into my brain about how important all of this is. And you have to acknowledge it. And it has to become part of you in a loving, kind, supportive way, because removing the trauma, or whatever word you want to give it, that's built up inside of you, isn't just taking a simple pill or a quick flick of the switch. If it took you 45 years to get there, it's not going to take you 2 days to undo all of that. It's going to be a process, and you have
Mhm.
to be so patient and so kind and so loving, because your attitude towards the whole thing is really key.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think patient and kind and loving are great and good places to be. And I think I would emphasize the patient, because what I noticed in my program is that people come in and they want to be good students, and so they want to do all the things. And I am forever telling them to slow down. Right. So when people come in, they want to like learn all the stuff and do all the practices right away. And your nervous system, when it's in this stressed out state, can't handle that much input. It just feels like more threat. Right. And so having compassion for yourself and having, it's the same as we would do for our horses, right? So if you have a rescue horse come in that is clearly stressed, and you don't know, just pretend you don't know anything about their background. Like dropped at your doorstep, rescue horse comes in and they're clearly stressed out. You're going to give that horse time and patience and let them come along in their own way. But we don't give ourselves that same patience. We beat ourselves up. We're like, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm so slow. Why am I so behind? I should be further along. Like, and further along than what? We compare, what
Exactly.
are we even comparing ourselves to? But I hear this constantly, like I should be further ahead. Well, but you're not. You are where you are.
Yeah.
And
And
your
and
nervous
it's
system,
perfect
yeah,
exactly where you
you're,
are.
and the other thing I think is important to remember is that your nervous system isn't broken, right? So many people are like, oh, I'm broken. No, your nervous system is, like you said, Mona, it's responding to an environment that is filled with threats, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. We're not meant to live in this kind of environment. And that is the struggle with having a regulated nervous system, is that in theory, we should all just be regulated and we could just forget about it, and our bodies would just do the thing naturally. We would learn it as children and pass it down to our own children and our own communities, and it would just be part of who we are. But we live in these contrived worlds where we're under a constant barrage of, things we're supposed to be doing, pinging and dinging from all this technology. I mean, it's endless. There's pollution, there's traffic, there's work stress, there's financial. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on.
Absolutely. And on that, later in my fear workshop here, we talk a lot about, well, we're going to be talking a lot about how the horse nervous system is so similar to ours. And so then and I call it my outside the box horse care, because I look at it, okay, so what are we doing to the horses that takes away? Because everything that we do, we think we're giving. But let's look at it from a different point of view and what they evolved to be. And so if we look at it from outside the box, when we feed them 3 times a day, we are no longer giving them a choice when to eat. When we decide the only stuff that they do get to eat, we're no longer giving them a choice there. They don't get to decide who they're buddied with. They don't get, so when you start looking at it, we think we're providing the absolute best care we could possibly ever provide. But when you start looking at it in a whole other perspective, we're removing all of their choices. We're removing all of their say. And so when we look at the environment we live in, when our choice and say is removed, the stress we feel increases. And so then when you look back to their world, so unknowingly, unwittingly, we're participating in some of that with them as well.
Yeah. In fact, I was actually just having a conversation this morning with a veterinarian. And we were talking about treating horses in a different way. So she was talking about the realization that she'd come to in her practice, that she's like, people want me to x-ray or, to image their horses, to inject their horses, to do all this stuff. And she's like, well, let's talk about their lifestyle. Let's talk about, are they sleeping? Let's talk about, do they feel safe in their environment? Let's talk about, like, is their sympathetic nervous system active? And that's why they have a tight back. Like, what we can inject it all day long, but like, is that really the problem? Or is the problem that this horse is so stressed, just chronically stressed, just like I was chronically anxious, right? This horse might, there are so many horses that I see. I am not a horse trainer. I train my own horses. I don't train other people's horses, never have, and don't.
Same with me.
Yeah, it's one of these things where I constantly want to, I constantly think, should I do that? And then I'm like, I don't think I can handle it. It's a whole thing. But I'm around horses because I have my horses at a facility and always have. So I'm always at some facility, great facilities, great people, like nothing. It's not that, the people are not a problem, but I look at some of these horses and just through a lack of awareness on the people's part, not their fault, because it's just the culture we grew up in, but because they don't know, they don't see that, like, some of these horses, I wouldn't get on them. They're riding, these horses are very well behaved in their saddle. And I watch them on the ground. I'm like, that horse is stressed. It's chronically stressed. And then they, are 9, 11, 13, whatever. And they start having, pain issues, joint degeneration, performance issues. And it's like, oh, well, they're breaking down, they're wearing out. And it's like, or is it that their pain pathways are active? We know from human pain science, this is like a little bit of a tangent probably, but I do think it's interesting. We know from human pain science that when we put people into an MRI or an X-ray, that there is no correlation between what we see there and their levels of pain. So we used to think there was. We used to be like, oh, you have pain? Well, let's X-ray and see why. And then people get an X-ray and be like, wow, your back is a mess. No wonder you hurt. Well, then someone had the brilliant idea to look at people who don't have pain. Like, what do their backs look like? So they started imaging all the people who don't have pain. And lo and behold, we have about the same prevalence of, aberrations and structural issues on the images for people who have no pain. Well, shoot.
Yeah.
Go
figure, right?
What do we do with that? So we're doing the same things to our horses. We're like, oh, yep, there's kissing spines. It's like, well, is that is it the problem, or is it the problem that their sympathetic nervous system is really active? Like, I honestly don't know in the case of kissing spines specifically, but I think that there's probably a very similar problem going on. And my own horse, one of my horses has a rehab case that bears this out, where the imaging shows problem, but I have been able to rehabilitate her and she does not, knock wood, at the moment have a problem. So I think that we can extrapolate from the human pain science and be like, oh, veterinary care needs to be more all-encompassing, just like human medical care needs to be more all-encompassing, where we really need to be looking at the nervous system and the trauma patterns. And we also, for ourselves and our horses, we really need to stop assuming that we're all the same fundamentally. We are not the same.
Nope. Each one of us is unique.
We are individuals. And so, like, our horses are not motorcycles. If I wanted predictability, I'd go get a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And we're the same. So it's like, there's a real tendency to compare ourselves to some kind of like fictitious baseline that doesn't exist. So it's much more interesting, in my opinion, to look at the trend within an organism. It's like, what's my trend? What's my anxiety pattern? And is it getting better or worse or the same with my horse? What's her anxiety pattern? Is it improving or, getting worse? That's much more informative than comparing one of us to something else.
Yes. A big thing that happened with me. So Gemini has really high self-preservation. He always has, really concerned about everything. And then I got PTSD. So that pushed him over the edge, because now his somewhat safe place, meaning me, was nowhere near safe to be around. So I would open the house door, and before I even set foot outside, he was aware and he was gone to the far end of the field. If I did manage to catch him, I'd be hanging on to the end of the rope and he would be charging at me, rearing, trying to rip the rope out of my hand, kick me, do all sorts of things that he had never done ever in his life. And meanwhile, I'm at the worst place in my life that I could possibly be in. And I think I'm hiding it. But clearly,
No.
I'm not hiding a single
Yeah.
thing from him. And he's basically telling me, get away from me. I can't hack this. Get away. This is way too much for me. This is overboard. And so, what did I do in the beginning? I didn't focus on me. Oh, no, I focused on him. I focused on, well, what's your problem, dude? We have to fix you.
Right.
And here it's me that needed to be fixed.
Yeah.
And so, in many ways, he's been responsible for many of my big ahas, because he's forced me to do all sorts of things because I genuinely want the best for him. And he has exceptionally high needs in so many avenues. But when I meet all of those, he's the horse that when I ride, every single person that meets me wants to buy him. And so
That's
no
so
one,
funny. Oh my gosh.
no one would ever guess what he's really like.
Mhm.
But it all depends on me. And that was the first really clue. And part of the reason why I started the Partner Up program is the realization that we don't need to fix the horse. If we fix ourselves, everything else just falls into place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I think it's both and. I mean, definitely fixing ourselves and I hate the word fix, to be
Well, I don't know
totally
another
honest,
word to
but
use, but
yeah,
it's
I think
working on ourselves
I
to be
think
the best we can be.
cultivating regulation, having a regulated nervous system ourselves is imperative. But in the process of regulating our own nervous system, we learn how to attend to other nervous systems. So I know someone who started regulating her nervous system, and she's like, wow, I got so much better at taking care of my plants. Right. Like just a weird, like not the intention, but as she became more attuned to her own needs, her own nervous system and her own needs, she was then able to attune to her house plants better. Now, I am not particularly good with plants, but I am good with things with fur. And and yeah, I'm often the person where, someone's dog will come up to me and like flop on my feet and they're like, wow, she never does that. And I'm like, I don't know. It's because they sense that safety in us. I also have a guy, a boy, a gelding, a little Mustang with high self-preservation. If you hang out with me at all online or in any of my programs, I talk about him a lot. He's my guru. He's my masterclass. He's my teacher. I've gotten information from many sources, but he will tell me very quickly if it's BS or not.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And he, he similarly, I don't ride him. I would love to. I'm trying to set that aside, but I really would love to because he's beautiful. Because he has high self-preservation, and his biggest thing is stuff on his back. Like that's the thing that we've just never really. He's still concerned. I've had him 6.5 years. He's still concerned about it. And he is who he is, right? But people tell me all the time, oh, he's so calm. I'm like, this is the horse that has a hair trigger and he bolts, and his bolt is no joke. Like it is no joke. It is, I had when I was still trying to figure out what was going on and thinking I didn't know what I was doing, I took him to a trainer who is now a really good friend and also an awesome trainer, to be like, what am I missing? I'm clearly missing something, right? I've screwed something up. It turns out I hadn't screwed anything up. He is who he is. And she asked me, okay, so when he bolts, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like 10 being like a cougar's on my back, where is he? And I said, a 15. And she's like, oh, and she didn't quite believe me. And then he did it to her on the ground. And she was like, you weren't joking,
Yeah.
But when he's with me, I'm safe. I'm his safe person. And I'm the only one who can catch him too. So, I'm his person. He's happy, he's fine. And people don't believe me. And I try to explain to them who he is. And they always think I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
And then they witness
Yes.
it and they're like, oh,
Yes, yes, I can relate to that. I can
yeah.
relate to that. And now that we've been chatting away, everybody's muted, but does anybody have anything that they would like to ask before I just keep rambling on and asking questions and adding stuff? Just,
I do.
hi, Ellen.
So this is part of, hi, oh yes, this is Ellen. Sorry, I had to turn my picture off. It's working much better. I can hear what you guys are talking about now. So with, because both of you have experience in this, so where, I guess, what are your first steps? Or is this course our first steps in getting our nervous system under control, or changing it, or whatever words you want to use, as far as making it a comfortable place for both us and our animals to hang out at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say the very first thing. So there's a lot of ways we could go into this question, but the very first thing that I like to teach when people are learning how to have a regulated nervous system is what I call somatic literacy. And that is being able to feel your body. So we've kind of touched on this already in this conversation, but being able to feel your body and have an experience of your body. This gets taught sometimes, like, you might go to like a body oriented therapist or a coach or something like that. And they might say like, oh, well, what do you notice in your body, or where do you feel that in your body? Like, where do you feel your stress in your body or something? And that's kind of a very light way to do it. But somatic literacy is really being able to track your sensory experience in your physical self. And it's a very difficult thing to convey linguistically because it really gets to that part of us that is the wild horse, right? So I can't, like my sensitive guy, I always say, like, I can't walk up to him and have a rational conversation with him and be like, dude, you're okay now. Like, the food's going to keep coming. No cougars here. You're good. Like he's not going to hear me. Because he can't, like, he doesn't have that part of his brain. And we have that too. Like, there's a part of us that is that can't, it's not connected to the rational linguistic part of us. So somatic literacy is really being able to connect with that part of us. And in so doing, we also get better at connecting to our horse's nervous systems, just inherently, as we track our own. And it can start with noticing what we notice in our body and in our environment. The one caveat that I have on this is that if you've had, and here's this word again, which I don't love, but if you've had a traumatic experience, or if you have trauma stored in your body, when you start to feel your body, that can be highly triggering, right? So a lot of people don't like it. The sensory information is overwhelming. A lot of times we dissociate from it because it is so overwhelming. And when someone's like, what do you notice in your body? Either it's not available, which can be triggering, like I can't feel myself, and that's very disorienting, and that's not comforting at all. Or you can feel things and it's way overwhelming. So it's quite a tricky thing to learn sometimes, but it really, in my opinion, is the foundation of embodiment and moving forward with nervous system healing. So a lot of people will try to jump in with practices, like this is what you do, like, do this breathwork practice or do this movement practice or that kind of a thing. But what I've noticed is that if you can't feel your body, you have no idea if it's made an impact or not, right? It's like getting in the car and saying, like, let's drive. You're going to go somewhere, but you have no idea where you're going.
Absolutely. And
Yes,
so to answer that backwards and forwards, Ellen, from my perspective. And so that's why in the beginning, we spent so much time on awareness, and we spent so much time on mindfulness, because that's part of the journey, and that's why the energy component of what we learned about followed after all of that, because I'm trying to do it in little blocks. So we're working our way along. And so throughout all of fear, and as we move into anatomics, those blocks are continuing. And so I can't do the work for you, but I can provide you with all of the information for you to get your own understanding. And like I'm always saying, you have to make everything that I teach your own. You can't just replicate something because this is what I say. You need to feel it, know it, play with it, manipulate it, and make it your own, because then it's speaking directly to you. And that's where the power in all of this comes from. And so that goes back to why I made you make a meditation that spoke to you, because the journey is all about getting to know who you are with no right or wrong, but now starting to surround yourself with all the things that speak to you, because that makes it easier to start tuning in comfortable. And that's also why some of those happening techniques that we talked about in the beginning are there, because if some of the trauma and emotional responses are too great, then you have a way to lessen that so that you can keep staying present and keep going deeper and keep working with whatever it is you need to work on, so that you get that peace and the back to calm and all of those places. And then you have to remember, subconscious mind wants to keep you with what's familiar. And
Right.
so you're working against that as well, because that's a component. And so every time you're struggling with something, you have to recognize all of these blocks that are stopping you from going where you want to go, because your conscious mind isn't the only one that has a say.
Right. Yeah. And
And
that makes that all kind of makes sense in the way it's coming forward. Because I had years ago, I had a masseuse who kind of got started with the awareness part, and then this course and the awareness part of this course was really good for me, because that kind of opened my eyes to a lot more of it. And so there's more happening now than there has been before. So, and everything that you guys say, like I can, kind of like, I can't always put it always into words, but I can relate to it, I guess, maybe if that's the right term.
yep.
And just trying to like, just keep going and keep educating myself, right? And then applying it in life. So, but I mean, I'm human. I want it to work in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So
And
I just
if,
have to kind of chill out for a minute and
yes.
let it happen, right?
And if this brings any calmness or reassurance, we have 18 hours just on fear and all of this stuff. So we're going to take it really nice and slow. We're going to go, I'm breaking everything down as small as I can. So we're going to talk about every component that's involved in the nervous system, how it works, why it works. And then we're going to start going through, the different things that you can help to release things or do things. And again, the idea is to provide you with enough resources, because the stuff I use for me is a combination of probably 5 or 6 other people's stuff. I have melded it to make it mine, because when I use that, put together how I've created it for myself, it's instantaneous. It doesn't matter how bad anything's going on. I can put myself right back to like ground zero. And I've never been able to do that ever in my life. And
Okay.
so, yeah, if I can make you feel a little bit more confident, you're going to be getting everything in bite-sized pieces. And then it's not about getting it. It's about playing with it, enjoying it, making it your friend, and then being curious enough to start pulling it all apart and going, oh, well, can I use this and not this? Could I do this and not that? So you find your own magic.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions before we get, I guess it's almost an hour before we wrap up? Okay, so no other questions. All right. So in closing, Sukie, I'll give you the floor for another like 5 or 6 minutes. And if you want to kind of tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, and if you send me an email, I will put it all in an email to
Sure.
them, so they know all of your different programs if they want to go and like, yeah, because you're another wonderful, absolutely amazing resource. And for when people want to go farther than where I'm going with what I'm teaching, I want to make sure they have those avenues.
Well, yeah, I mean, and just to tag on to what you just said, sometimes hearing this from different people, because I love what you're doing and everything you're putting together, I'm in complete alignment with. But when you hear something from another teacher who's in alignment with that, like sometimes it just helps things land differently, even if it's the same content, even if it's the same principle, whatever. So I always recommend, when people are looking at my programs or my content, like, yeah, go learn from other people too, because as you start to expose yourself to lots of this stuff, then the work does start to become your own, right? Like you do start to see those common threads. So I love that you said that. If you're interested in my work and you want to know more, you can find me at wholebodyrevolution.com. That's my website. I'm also on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Sukie Baxter, and that's SUKIE BAXTER. And Instagram is at Sukie Baxter. I'm not on Instagram a lot. I'm not on social media a ton. I do have quite a few YouTube videos. I tend to focus on, the students who are in my program. I'll send you the link to this, Mona. I just did a free training, and you can still get the replay. So we just held the live class, but the replay is available for 5 keys to unlock trauma stored in the body. And I do
Yeah,
talk
I
about
watched that.
Yeah, great. Okay, awesome. Yes.
And so now I can share that link with everyone else.
Yeah. So when you go to
Awesome.
the sign up page, you can sign up to get the replay. So yeah, I'll forward you that link as well. But that can be a really great place to learn more about nervous system regulation. I talk about somatic literacy and a bunch of other, 4 other keys to helping. So these are the principles that I use in the work that I do, which, I love what you were just saying about like tearing things apart and making it your own. I'm very principle based in the work that I do. I don't like methods or like a set of hard practices. I look at everything as a laboratory, right? So the principles are always at play. It's just, sometimes one leads more than another, but everything you're doing, the practice, the exercise, the mindful, whatever you're doing is simply the laboratory within which to experience your nervous system. So that'll give you some more context for that as well. I think that's everything.
Yeah. And just so that everyone knows, as we move through, I'm using some of Sukie's videos that she has on YouTube. So you'll actually get to see some of the stuff that she's produced and is on YouTube. And whenever you want to start looking through all of the material she has there's a lot, and it's all really well done and easy to follow. And some of the exercise things are pretty cool and amazing how well they work.
Yeah, simple things. And so I want to end on this note, which ties into what you were saying too, Mona. People ask me a lot on YouTube. The number one question I get is people say, this worked great. How often can I do this? And I'm like, as much as you want. It's your nervous system.
Mhm.
You own this for yourself, right? So like, go forth and love your nervous system. You don't need permission from me or anyone else to do things that feel good. The only time I say stop doing it is if it stops feeling good, if it starts causing you problems, right? So if you find something that works, use it. Yeah.
Well, Sukie, I'm absolutely honored that you are able to join us today. And so thank you ever so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Sukie.
Bye-bye, Sukie. Okay. So now I'm going to continue on with our lesson for the next 30 minutes, and then we're going to have a little Q&A if there are any, and then we're good to go. All right. So I wasn't sure she could make it, so that's so good. All right. So we finished off here last time, and I just wanted you to remember that only 5% of our life is with our conscious brain, 95% is with our subconscious brain. And so when we start looking at fear, doubt, self-doubts, and trauma, and all of these other things, what our conscious brain is giving us is a very minuscule part of the actual picture. And that's why we need to start learning all about the nervous system and how it works, and all of those good kinds of things. And that brings me to the why. And so Sukie and I touched on this a little bit, but how everything in our lives and societies and the environment we live in has evolved has created us a setting that's not conducive to having a peaceful, regulated life, because there are so many demands on our time for survival. So back in the olden days, when we were running around living in caves, the only demand on our survival was figuring out how we were going to eat, collecting and saving that food, and staying away from predators. And so those are three little things. We don't encounter predators every single day. And gathering food, while it may be hard work, isn't necessarily a stressful activity. We did not have a set time to eat. We ate when we were hungry. We did not have times when you could go to the bathroom. We went to the bathroom when we had to go to the bathroom. So the environment that we live in now, that we've become accustomed to, has us operating on a clock that often is not in alignment with our biological clock. So we're getting up because we have to, not because we wake up. And so when you start looking around, we don't have a choice. If we're driving back and forth to work, we can be having to deal with that traffic 2 times a day. We don't have a say in that. There is no way around it. We just do it. We make it part of our lives. And the same thing goes for our working. So everyone I know puts work ahead of play. And we're taught that. And if you played first, people would frown on you, like, what kind of lazy whatever is that? And so when we start looking around our environment, I want you to really start understanding how we've always felt might not be a very good indicator of what it feels like to be at peace. Because maybe we have actually never felt that. And that's a really good possibility. And so Sukie touched on that a little bit. She had anxiety her whole life and never knew it because that was just normal for her. And so as we move through this whole section on fear, and like I said in the first lesson, so fear is a word that's encompassing so many different things. It's just one word. And so, yeah, it's just hanging on to many, many, many different things. And why we have these breakdowns in our system, we'll learn more about it as we go on. But in some of the cases, everything just adds up. So you get up in the morning, you're tired because you really wanted to sleep longer, but your alarm went off. So you get up because only lazy people stay in bed, or you have to get the kids to school, or you have to get yourself to a job. So poof, you're up. And so now you're trying to get ready to start your day. So all that's creating stress that you might not even be recognizing. So then you got to hop in your car and you got to get to where you're going. Well, so now depending on the traffic, road conditions, and whether your car starts or whatever, there's more stress. Then you get to wherever you need to go, dropping the kids off or your work or wherever. Well, now there's some other aspect that has control over your time. So you have another deadline that you have to meet time-wise. It's not like, phew, I can just wander through my day and enjoy the day. And I'm not saying that all of these things are bad, but what I'm saying is we need to recognize the impact that we have and start being more aware, because all of those things affect us. And as we age, more of the stuff comes to the forefront, partly because you can't have a part that's not really working well, even how tiny it is. Eventually it starts to show up somewhere down the road. And so, yeah, and that was a really big journey for me. I talked about it a little bit, but that was a big journey. I had to learn everything the hard way because that's me and whatever. So you gotta be able to laugh at it because
I think
my
that's what we
God.
do as humans, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the things that, I talk about a lot is learning how to walk through your fear. Now, that does not mean that you ignore it or you deny it. But what it does mean is you embrace it and you say, I feel you, I love you, and you are safe. And instead of going to do dishes, because that is your escape route, you go out and you spend the time with your horse. You may not ride, but at the same time, you're not going to allow all of the things that you've put in your life to keep you safe, that your subconscious mind has had there. You're going to start identifying them and you're going to start saying, I see you're there. I understand why you're there, but we're just going to keep walking. I'm going to feel the hurt. I'm going to cry if I have to. I'm going to go and find a tree that I can yell or scream at. I'm going to do whatever I need to do so that I can release enough of this fear from my body so I can just keep moving forward. And that process is really empowering. And so one of the things that you need to do, and this is in your workbook, so you're going to be listing all of your fears and determining whether they are fears, doubts, self-doubts, or trauma. And so as an example with that, I'm afraid of bugs. I'm afraid of going to a play and having to get up and go to the bathroom and not being able to get there in time. I am afraid of falling off my horse. So it does not matter how big or how small the fear is. All of the things that cross your mind or you have maybe considered more than twice are okay to be written on that list. And once you have that big list, then you're going to be deciding whether they're friend or foe. So a friend fear, totally designed to keep you safe. And it does not exist part of the place of keeping you safe. A faux fear stops you from enjoying your life. So the faux fear is what has you doing dishes rather than going out and spending time with your horse. A faux fear has you not getting in the car to go on the holiday because you're scared of having a vehicle accident. A faux fear prevents you from getting on the airplane. A faux fear prevents you from swimming in a lake because there might be a leech. And so I have a faux fear with leeches. And so we're listing friend or foe, not because we're judging. We're just looking at it as face value, where we're at, and all of these things in our lives, because they're all part of us. And then once you've started to identify all of these different fears and self-doubts and trauma or whatever, then you're going to start writing down how you deal with them. Do you avoid them? Do you get too busy? Do you figure out you don't have any money? Like, what's your avenue that you tend to want to take to be able to get through life and not have to address or deal with any of these issues? And so there, again, there's no right or wrong answer, but the reason that we are going through all of this is because we need to start thinking about how we are going to do this. How are we going to start identifying where we're at, how we got there, where we're going to go, all of that good kind of stuff. And I'm just looking through the workbook right now, seeing. Okay. So. All right. Okay. And yeah, so on the very last page of your homework assignment is what we have written here, where list your fears and determine whether they're fears, self-doubts, doubts, or trauma. And then decide, are they friend or foe, and describe how you deal with each of them. And then the homework part, what are your takeaways from today's session? What did you learn about yourself today? And what can you apply moving forward? Are the 3 little questions that you answer not only in your homework, but you shoot an email to me before next class. So I get to read that, because that's helping me know that I'm hitting the mark and making sure everybody is getting what they need to get as we move through part 2 of the Partner Up workshop. And so are there any questions in that regard? Okay. And so I'm going to leave you with this. So anticipating the good. So change can occur in almost every aspect of our lives. And that's okay. We don't need to worry about that. We can learn to embrace it while releasing the past with grace. So just because I had 2 vehicle accidents in which I sustained a huge amount of energy, or I sustained a huge amount of damage, not energy and the impact maybe, but does not mean every time I get into a vehicle, I need to be concerned that that's going to happen again. So I can let go of those fears and those traumas and just enjoy the present moment. And so all of the stuff that we learned about being in the moment, this is one of the places where you get to really putting that to use. Because when you're existing in the moment, you don't have anything in your head that's worrying about what's coming or what's past. You're just in the moment. And so it might mean several times throughout the day, you have to find a way to get yourself right in that moment. And of course, if all of the stuff that we've learned so far isn't doing the ticket, we have more stuff that we're learning coming up. But nonetheless, Getting yourself in the driver's seat is really, really, really important. And Sukie was talking about somatics and being able to feel your body. And so here's a little exercise. I'm going to do a post on this. I just don't have it done yet. But if you think about it and you think about how often you have heard somebody say, well, feel. You should be able to hold that lead rope and just feel. And if you ask somebody, well, how do I know what to do with my reins? Well, feel it, and then you'll know. And you sit there with this big question mark swirling around up above your head thinking, well, I don't feel anything. So let's take another step and look somewhere else. So every one of us probably spends more time driving in a vehicle than we do riding our horses. So the next time you get into your vehicle and you put your hands on the steering wheel, think about feel. And these are the questions I'm going to throw out there. Can you feel when you run over that bottle cap? Do you know what tire run over the bottle cap? Can you feel if you've left yourself enough top end so that you know halfway, just as you enter into the curve, you have enough top end to suck that baby's bottom right down in and take you around that curve without rolling the tires? What's the feel to press on the brake enough to slow the car or truck or whatever without skidding, without leaving a mark? When you're on an icy road, what's the feel of the brake that you can use before pressing too hard on the brake will make you skid or lose control? What about steering? So when I'm coming into a corner, if I start my turn too soon, how many times do I have to correct throughout that corner because my feel was not exactly where it was in the beginning, versus when my feel is bang on, my turn throughout that, it's just one smooth move. I don't even have to turn my steering wheel again. It's all just happening because the time when I asked and I turn is all coinciding, and that all happens with feel. So if we start paying more attention every time we drive our car and thinking about feel, because feel comes when we're feeling what's going on inside our body, and our body tells us everything, not just our mind here. We can then start applying that somewhere else, because connecting to our body is a skill. And so feel is a really important part. And when Sukie was talking about the somatic part of it, so being able to connect with your body and know what your body is saying to you is really, really, really important when you want to start addressing different things, releasing trauma or releasing an imbalance or any of those kinds of things. And so, yeah, so really think about the car the next time you get into the car to go for a drive or a spin. And so how much do you lean in your car? And now if you accelerate, does that take the lean out of your car when you're going around a curve? Really start paying attention to the different things that happen. Pay attention to whether or not you're focused 15 feet in front of you, or you're actually looking a mile down the road. and you're actually already prepared for 3 turns ahead, or are you only prepared for the turn that you're in? And start paying attention to where all of these things take you. Okay, questions?
This is actually kind of describing my trip.
Yeah,
And
so if you
kind of
go in the
explaining
ditch,
why it was so
yeah, if you go in the ditch, don't call me.
So thank you, Mona.
If you go in the ditch, you know your feel was off.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do that much. My poor dog was hiding in the far corner of the cabin. So
Yeah.
he was sleeping and he would only cock an eye occasionally. It's like, okay, are you okay? And he's like, no,
Yes.
are you okay?
Yes. And on top of all of that, you can be feeling, are you holding your breath when you're driving? Are you relaxed when you're driving? You know, what's going on? And
Right.
so, yeah, all of them good kinds of things.
Where you end up, right? All of a sudden you hurt all over, and it's like, hey, what are you doing? You're clamping onto the steering wheel. My shoulders are locked into this weird position, and my legs are all tensed up. And it's like, okay, okay, why are you doing this? You gotta chill, relax. Nothing bad happened, right? Like it was like one of those things where you're not aware, and then it's
Yep.
like, oh my God, I hurt, right? And oh my God, like, why is this happening? Oh my God. And it's like, okay, you're doing that way too much. You need to stop. Stop.
Yes. Yes. So true.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to stop the recording here. And so I'll see everybody next class. And then for those that are staying for our little bit of a Q&A period, you can stay. And so then I can get this link ready off and shared for everybody. So see you next class. Make sure you get your homework in, and we'll see you then. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Yeah.